even though nobody's talking about it really anymore and everybody wants to pretend like everything is back to normal and like the pandemic isn't happening, but there's also another crisis. We're in the worst economic crisis in history. And I keep repeating that because, again, I don't think people understand the scale of the crisis. This is worse than the Great Depression. Now, the latest chapter of this economic crisis is this expiring of the eviction moratorium. Now, before I get into it, let me be clear. There have been evictions going on for months. They've been going on all throughout this pandemic, to be honest. The eviction ban was put in place under Donald Trump, which it was, I mean, the entire thing was an unprecedented step, really, to have the president of the United States to just put a pause on all evictions. I really can't think of another time in history that's ever happened before. So it was, I mean, it's honestly what was necessary to deal with the scale of the crisis. But it was just, but even though it was an unprecedented step, it was it was handled very shitty because it wasn't really enforced. Like I said, there were evictions going on across the country, city to city, state to state. And it really started ramping up maybe May or sometime in the summer of 2020, and it hasn't really stopped. They've continued to renew the bans, and Trump put in a new thing. It was an order from the CDC instead of the initial executive order, and they've keep kicking the can down the road. And the crisis was going to be the same. This problem, the gigantic elephant in the room, was always the same. And we've known that this was going to be a problem since the CARES Act was passed, since March 2020, when the initial government, what was allegedly the government response to the pandemic and the economic crisis, what really was just a corporate heist. We knew back then that this was going to happen, that the ban on evictions was going to be up. And like I said, there were still evictions happening during the pandemic, and it should have been enforced a lot more strongly. There shouldn't have been a single person kicked out of their house during the pandemic, and there's an argument to be made that this shouldn't happen ever in a civilized society. But it was happening anyway, but the ban was still in place. And now that it's expiring, even more people who were under the protection of this, now it's gone for everybody, and it's fair game to throw anybody out who's months behind on rent because of the pandemic and the economic crisis. So, like I said, this is something we knew was going to happen since the CARES Act, and instead of dealing with it at the time, they chose to kick the can down the road. They chose not to even address it in the CARES Act at all. They had put like maybe $1 billion for housing assistance or whatever, but there was nothing to deal with the real root of the problem. People are going to owe months in back rent, and it will be literally impossible for them to pay it back no matter what happens. If they get a job or if they start working, the pandemic disappears, whatever, people are going to be months behind on rent. And unless the government steps in, it is going to be a calamity, and there's going to be a mass homelessness crisis. But they didn't address that in the CARES Act, which it goes to show you that shit didn't do anything it was supposed to do. Because if you were really crafting legislation to deal with the pandemic and economic crisis, I think one of the first things up, obviously, should have been providing healthcare to everybody in this country, free at the point of service, single payer healthcare like every other modern country has. That should have been the first priority. And also right up there with it should have been making sure that people don't lose their homes in a fucking pandemic. But they didn't do either of those. It was, like I said, just a giant corporate heist. So now the bans on evictions are expiring, but I'm recording this on Friday. The ban is expiring on this Saturday. And as it stands right now, the number is, there's not an exact number, but there's a range of maybe between like 4 to 6 million people who are months behind on back rent. because of the economic crisis. And so now, like I said, and let me rephrase that. It's not 46 million people. It's 46 million families. So a family can be two parents and a kid, or one parent, two kids, three kids, whatever. 4 to 6 million families are now liable to be evicted. They can be evicted at any moment now because the moratorium, Joe Biden allowed this moratorium to expire. And I really want to emphasize that, and that this was a choice by the Biden administration. They did not have to allow this to happen. They chose to allow this to happen. I'll get into where a lot of the blame lies in a little bit, but I really want to highlight how outrageous what is about to happen it really is. And no matter what I say, I cannot adequately put into words the devastation that's about to be brought into this country that was completely avoidable. Like I said, 46 million families. So it could be the real number of people who can be lose their homes, their apartments, whatever. It could be anywhere from 10 million, 15 million to 20 million people, probably even more. Could be even more than that. Homeless. Currently, there's anywhere between 800,000 and a million homeless people in this country right now. And we're talking about multiplying that number. And again, from something that was completely avoidable and could have been handled had the government done their job and canceled the rent and mortgage debts that have accumulated over the crisis. So, and even when people talk about it, it kind of feels sanitized because you don't really get what's about to happen to these people, to these millions of families. Because evicted, it's a very clinical term and it sounds very cold, and you don't get the full picture. So what's going to happen now, because Joe Biden allowed this eviction ban to expire, because he does not give a fuck about people and he does not want to help the people, even though that's his fucking job as president. Because he let this eviction moratorium expire, now 46 million families, they're going to have to go through this stuff, take whatever it is that they can possibly carry with them, and then lose all their possessions, get locked out of their homes, have nowhere to go, and this is going to be provide a whole other set of headaches for them. How they're going to feed their kids if they can't cook at home, how they're going to have a stable job without a place to live. All of these things are going to be reverberating consequences because they allowed this eviction ban to expire. What's also going to happen to these people is it's not just that they're going to lose all their shit and they're not going to have anywhere to go. What's also going to happen to them is now their credit is going to take a hit almost permanently, or for a very long time. This is going to be a permanent mark on their record to make it even harder, if not impossible, for them to get housing after they get evicted because of this. So their credit score is going to take a giant hit through no fault of their own, because, like I said, the worst economic crisis in history. And they're going to be blacklisted because that eviction is going to be on their record. So it's going to be next to impossible to get approved anywhere else. So the trajectory of these people's lives is going to be changed forever because Joe Biden allowed this eviction ban to expire. And that's it. It's completely unconscionable. It's inexcusable. Like I said, we've known this was going to happen for over a year now. Joe Biden has been president. Democrats have had complete control of government, control of the House and the Senate for over 6 months. And they haven't done a goddamn thing about this eviction crisis. They kept kicking the can down the road, and now they're just going to let it expire, and they're just going to let all these people get thrown onto the streets, on top of the people who've already been evicted and all the people who are already living out on the streets. They're just going to let this shit happen. And this is what this is supposed to be the good guys, right? This is supposed to be the lesser of two evils, right? The good Democrats. This is the progress, it's at least you're going in the right direction. That's what this with the Democrats, right? They're going to be responsible for the largest eviction crisis, the largest homelessness crisis in the history of this country, and they didn't lift a goddamn finger to stop it. Not one of them. Not one of them. And the whole argument to elect Joe Biden was, oh, we need to have somebody who's a serious adult. We need to have somebody serious to deal with the pandemic, to deal with the economic crisis, to get us on the right track, right? That's what we were told. But look how he's handling this. This is objectively this is the worst possible way he could be handling this pandemic. On top of the fact that he really wasn't doing anything to contain the pandemic since he's been president. It's just like, okay, the vaccines are ready, now just get the vaccines. Doing absolutely nothing to mitigate the spread of the pandemic. It's already raging out of control, worse than it's ever been before, with the exception of the hospitals being overrun. But so they done a shitty job containing the pandemic, done a shitty job responding to the economic crisis, and now to highlight how shitty a job he's doing on both fronts, he's going to allow this massive eviction crisis to happen, which is going to deepen the economic crisis and is going to make the pandemic even worse. Because now these people aren't going to have anywhere to go. They're going to be just out in the public, exposing the public at all times to the virus. And so it's just going to make the whole thing worse. And again, completely avoidable. And I don't even want to entertain the bullshit that the people who defending Joe Biden are even saying at this point. Because, like I said, it's just bullshit. I don't want to hear anything. And right now they're trying to deflect blame from the Biden administration and say, oh, Congress should have, we're calling on Congress to do something about the eviction moratorium. They literally said this like a day before it expired, knowing damn well Congress wasn't going to do anything in that amount of time. Like I said, even though they had all this time to do it. But so now the White House is trying to put responsibility on Congress, because that's always the trick. And I want everybody to pay attention to this. Once you try to throw an issue up to Congress and it's up to Congress, it gives you 1,000,001 outs. It gives you 1,000,001 excuses. Oh, it's Joe Manchin here. Oh, it's some blue dog Democrats in the House. Oh, we have to get them to agree with this. You have 1,000,001 scapegoats as to why you're not doing what you're supposed to do. But in reality, yes, Congress should have done something about the economic crisis. They should have done something about the eviction crisis. They should have addressed it. They should have canceled the rent and the mortgages in the first stimulus bill that they passed under the Biden administration. Yes, all of that is true. And yes, they could have done that any other time since then. Yes, all that's true. But let's not act like Joe Biden is powerless here. Because one thing that has been put on display, I mean, it's been on display for a very long time, but even during this pandemic, is the real, there is no real limits to executive power and executive authority. Like, you can do basically anything. And Trump pushed the limits. And of course, his handling of the pandemic was unbelievably shitty, and he was responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths. Yes, all of that is true. But he pushed the boundaries of what people thought was the government was allowed to do when he banned these evictions in the first place. And he didn't go through Congress to do that. He didn't ask anybody's permission. He wrote an executive order, and it was basically an edict from on high, and nobody challenged him on it, because it's common fucking sense that there should be a ban on evictions during a pandemic. Joe Biden also has that option on the table, and they're going to hide behind some bullshit, vague ruling from the Supreme Court that they have to let the ban expire, and they aren't going to do anything to circumvent that. And again, I don't even want to entertain this bullshit, because again, he's the most powerful person on the planet, and if he wanted to ban the evictions, there are any number of tools in his toolbox that he can use to put up at least some kind of a fight. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But he's not even trying to do anything. If he wanted to, he could write a whole other executive order and say the pandemic's raging again. There's no way we're going to allow evictions, and I don't give a fuck what the court says. We're banning evictions, and any police department enforcing evictions is going to be charged or has some investigation from the Justice Department or whatever the fuck. Like, he could have used the power, the weight of the White House to make sure people don't get evicted if he actually cared. But again, I don't want to entertain this shit because Joe Biden doesn't actually care, and they don't actually want to stop the evictions. And the more accurate way to frame this entire thing is, and this is the elephant in the room, this is missing from all the discussions, Joe Biden isn't like some benevolent bystander here and looking for the best options. He's a corrupt oligarch serving oligarchy. And you know who's going to benefit from this mass eviction? The real estate developers and the Wall Street financial institutions that are going to buy up take these people's houses and or evict their tenants and just lease new people who can pay. Those are the people who are going to make out like fucking bandits when 5 to 6 million families get thrown out into the streets over the next couple months. And it's not a coincidence that those are the people who fund the Democratic Party to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. So let's not forget that there's giant financial conflicts of interest here. And Joe Biden allowing this to happen isn't just wild incompetence, it is also insanely corrupt. And I know don't tell me that the real estate industry and the financial institutions donated hundreds of millions of dollars to Joe Biden's campaign. And they are also the ones, literally the only people in the country who are going to financially benefit from this atrocity of evicting tens of millions of people in the middle of a pandemic. Don't tell me that it's just a coincidence that, those two things just happen to be true. They gave a bunch of money to Joe Biden and the Democrats, and the eviction moratorium is going to expire, and there's nothing anybody can do. And what do you know? The donors to the Democratic Party are the ones who are going to financially benefit from all of this. So this is fucking crazy, and I've been going on. This story has gone on way longer than I thought it would, but there isn't enough time to say what needs to be said. Of course, so much blame on the Justice Democrats and the fake progressives, really bunch of neoliberal incrementalists, including fucking Bernie Sanders. Shame on all of them, because they also knew this was going to happen. They've known for a year, and they haven't made any effort to force their party to do a fucking thing about it. We talk about forced to vote and all the leverage that they had to force a vote on Medicare for all. Yes, that's true. But I said at the time, and I'm going to say it again now, they should have been asking for even more than that. They should have demanded even more than that. The Democratic Party and our entire government had left people for dead during this entire emergency up until the point of the speaker's race in January. If these people who cared, the Justice Democrats, they cared enough about the people that they claim to represent, that they were going to challenge Democratic leadership, they would have done it right then, and they should have said, all right, it's insane that the Democrats control the House this entire time, and they hadn't had a single vote on UBI, they hadn't had a single vote on rent and mortgage cancellation, they haven't had a single vote on single payer or Medicare for all during the entire pandemic and the worst economic crisis in history. They should have used that leverage that they had during the speaker's race, during the forced to vote moment, and they should have demanded a vote on all those other things, including, like I said, the rent and mortgage cancellation and UBI. They didn't do that either. So not only did they abandon the Medicare for all, their core issue, their core campaign issue, they also abandoned the other shit that they were pretending that they wanted during the pandemic, because again, they had the opportunity to force a vote on it and make some traction on the issue and make some advancements on the issue, or even pass the policies, and they chose not to do it. So again, force to vote, their inaction there makes them responsible for all the people going to be on the streets. Again, with the stimulus bill, they could have said, we're not passing that stimulus bill, that shitty stimulus bill that Joe Biden passed back in, I don't know, maybe March, was it, I think? They could have said, we're not passing this unless you deal with the eviction crisis and cancel the rent and mortgage. They could have done that. They could have held up the bill, just like Joe Manchin held up the bill to kill the $15 minimum wage increase. They could have held up the bill unless there was decent shit in there to bail the people out. And again, they folded and they didn't put up a fight at all. So they aren't blameless here either. So there are no good guys. And again, that's one of the reasons why I spend so much time railing against the Justice Democrats, is because they keep raising money pretending to be adversarial and like they're going to fight the establishment, but they will never do that, and they go along with the establishment at every turn, even when it means allowing tens of millions of people to be evicted in the pandemic. They will go along with it because they don't want to rock the boat. And they're doing it again. They're still doing it again. They want you to vote for even more of them. The people who still support the Justice Democrats, people still defending Bernie Sanders and all these shitty politicians, they want you to, in the middle of this crisis, and as they're not doing anything, they still want people to give their hard-earned money to elect more fucking politicians so that they could go to Congress and not do a goddamn thing. So they could all go on vacation like they're about to do right the fuck now, go on vacation right at the start of the worst eviction crisis in the history of the United States. And they want you to go donate and volunteer for fucking Nina Turner so that she could go to Congress and not do a goddamn thing about any of this either. Unfucking believable. Over $4 million raised for this shitty election of Nina Turner. So again, so she could go to Congress and not do anything about the unprecedented crises that we're facing right now. So she could go to Congress and tweet about fucking Medicare for all and tweet about a bunch of other good shit that we should have and never once challenge Democratic leadership to implement those policies. People have raised over $4 million for this bullshit again. Like they haven't learned their fucking lessons from the rest of the Justice Democrat and Bernie Sanders. When they took you for a ride, they took your money, they took your volunteer hours and your blood, sweat, and tears. They got elected, they got themselves six-figure salaries, they got themselves health care, and they've secured themselves financially for the rest of their lives. And then they told you to kick rocks and they're not even going to fight for you a little bit. And then Nina Turner comes for her election because she wants hers now. And people, they're still in fucking catch on and they gave $4 million. Imagine if people put $4 million into some type of fucking mutual aid for people who are about to get evicted. Or you put $4 million into some type of direct action to fund some public fucking pressure to force the politicians to do something about this homelessness crisis. Imagine if we use those resources, all the volunteers and all this shit, to not elect somebody to advance their own fucking career, instead use that to help people. Imagine if we did that. But people still haven't learned the lesson. And it brings me to my final point that I'm going to say on this, and goddamn, this is a long video. But again, this is necessary. My loss for words, my complete lack of understanding how people aren't in the streets right now in this country, like every day, like mass protests every day, blocking up like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the streets every day. My wondering why that isn't happening, why there aren't massive riots in the streets regularly, it's gone beyond like some morbid curiosity, like, oh my god, like, do these people not know that they deserve better? Like, we can actually be better if you just fucking ask for something. It's gone beyond morbid curiosity to I'm genuinely afraid now. I'm fucking scared because it seems like there's literally nothing that the government can do that will outrage people enough in this country to actually do something about it. I mean, we're in a fucking pandemic. A mass casualty event is happening it's been happening in slow motion for over a year. And more people have died from this than any type of fucking war, anything that you can imagine in U.S. history. And again, it's still happening. No end in sight. And the government has just left us for fucking dead. On top of the economic crisis, they've left us for dead. And again, people aren't outraged enough to be in the streets about it. It's fucking bizarre. And like I said, it's scary because there is no limit. There is no limit. If 600,000 people could die in a pandemic and an economic crisis, and the country can completely fall apart to shit, and this isn't enough to get people in the streets. So if they were literally shoving people into gas chambers, would people be outraged enough to do something, to say anything about it? Because I mean, what's the difference here? What's the difference here? Hundreds of thousands of people are dying, and the government is going to exacerbate the problem by throwing millions of people into the street. What the fuck is going on here? It is really like some bizarro world Twilight Zone shit, and it's I don't know. There's no way that this shit is gonna fly. I don't know what's gonna happen, but there is even with the aversion to public pressure and direct action in this country and actually forcing politicians to do a goddamn thing. Even with that wild the brainwashing to make people avoid doing that, I don't know how the government can allow tens of millions of people to be thrown into the street, multiply the homeless population by like 5 or 10 times. I don't know how they can do that and not like there'll be some explosion of direct action and just chaos in the streets. I don't know like how that math isn't mathing for me. It's not adding up. They're fueling more chaos in this country by allowing this economic crisis to deepen. This is going to, I cannot put into words how bad this is. I really cannot put into words how bad this is. But if there are actions, direct actions, public pressure campaigns, anything happening, rent strikes, eviction strikes, whatever is happening, I'll try to cover it. I'll try to promote it because this is fucking ridiculous. This is fucking ridiculous. Even if you're not about to be evicted right now, somebody you know damn well is going to be evicted, and it could be very well you one day. So this is crazy. This is crazy. And to add insult to injury with this whole thing, it is not impossible to deal with this homelessness crisis. It would not be impossible to deal with this eviction crisis. All it would take is the government to put an effort into trying to protect their fucking citizens and doing anything to help them. And all it would call for is the government to go against like the number one, the defining principle, the core principle of our government over the last 50 years, which is like at all costs we need to avoid giving people money. They'll give money to corporations. They'll give money to the fucking war machine. They'll give money to the fossil fuel industry and the polluters destroying the planet. They will write them blank fucking checks. But when it comes to helping regular people, it is the biggest fucking sin in politics to give poor people money. And that mindset has become untenable. We are living in a completely different world. And allowing 10 million people to be thrown into the street is untenable. I don't know how many ways I can say that. That is an untenable. That option is not on the table. If you go through the menu list, you can't find that option anywhere because in any type of functioning society, that does not fucking work. So it would be a lot easier, a lot simpler than what's about to happen if the government decided to give everybody who owes rent the money that they need to pay the rent in full and to cancel whatever rent and mortgages that they have outstanding for the pandemic. That's what it would take. And as far as the people who are already homeless, people already don't have a home, it would cost $20 billion to eliminate homelessness in this country. $20 billion. And during the pandemic, they had empty hotels across the country, and they could have definitely housed them. There should not have been a single fucking person on the streets during this pandemic while all those hotels were empty. And beyond the hotels, there are more properties available, more homes and apartments available than there are homeless people in this country. So if the government really wanted to address the homeless crisis, they could pay to house people in this country. Or they can seize the property on an eminent domain. They do it all the time for corporations. They'll take land from and property from poor people, and so that corporations can benefit from it. But they won't do it in reverse for the public, which is what the government is there for. So if they wanted to, they can address this homelessness crisis. And they aren't just going to not do anything about it. They're going to make it worse, and they're going to multiply it to literally the worst homelessness crisis in the history of this country. And it is all happening while Democrats completely control government. This is what the lesser of the two evils gets you. This is what voting for the Democrats... And it isn't really the lesser of two evils, because Now people are just accepting this shit. Nobody's even pushing back against this shit because it's Joe Biden doing it and it's the Democrats, and everybody has in their mind that this is the best we can get because it's the Democrats, and they told me that they can't do anything else. So, oops, I guess we're just gonna let 4 to 6 million families be thrown out onto the fucking streets in the middle of a pandemic. This is fucking outrageous. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section. Let me know if any of you might be facing eviction in the comment section. And yes, I will be reading all the comments. So let me know.